My name is Vivienne Kowalski, and I am 52 years old, and the night my brother stood up at my birthday dinner and toasted himself, I had been sending him $400 a month for 9 years, 3 months, and 11 days. I know the exact duration because I kept a ledger. A small spiral notebook in the kitchen drawer beside the rubber bands and the dead batteries. Nothing formal, just dates and amounts and the occasional note in the margin when something changed. The first entry was dated March 14th, 9 years and several months before that birthday dinner at Carlucci's on West Wisconsin Avenue. The last entry was dated 6 days before the dinner. After that, the ledger stayed blank because I had already done what I was going to do, and there was nothing left to record. I am a high school art teacher. I have taught advanced drawing and introduction to printmaking at Riverside High School in Milwaukee for 23 years. I drive a 9-year-old Buick that I maintain carefully because I believe in taking care of things that take care of you. I have a cat named Walter, an orange tabby of considerable size and very little ambition, who has been my most reliable companion for 7 years and who has never once in his life taken credit for anything. I live in the same house I bought at 31. A brick 2-flat on the east side with good bones and a kitchen window that faces the backyard maple, and I have spent 20 years making it into a place I genuinely love. I tell you all of that because I want you to understand who I was before I tell you who I had been allowing myself to be treated as. Those are two different people. And for 9 years and 3 months and 11 days, I had been living mostly as the second one. To understand the birthday dinner, you have to understand my brother Raymond, and to understand Raymond, you have to understand our father. Clarence Kowalski was a large man with a large personality and a talent that I have spent most of my adult life learning to name accurately. He had a gift for positioning. He could walk into any occasion. A Sunday dinner my mother had spent 5 hours cooking, a holiday gathering my grandmother had planned for weeks, a birthday party organized by 3 people, none of whom were him, and within 20 minutes the entire event would have reorganized itself around his presence. His stories. His opinions. His running assessment of every choice anyone in the room had made or was considering making. He was not cruel. I want to be fair about that. My father was not a mean man. He was simply a man who had never once in 68 years paused to consider that the space he occupied might have held, before he arrived, something that belonged to someone else. Raymond watched this from the time he was old enough to understand what he was watching. He was 6 years younger than me, and where I watched my father and felt from an early age a quiet resistance, a sense that this was not the way I intended to move through the world, Raymond watched and learned. He learned the positioning. He learned the credit-taking. He learned the particular practiced ease of accepting other people's labor without acknowledging it, the way you accept the weather, as something that happens around you, not as something another person made happen on your behalf. My mother saw it. She and I talked about it once, about a year before she died, sitting at her kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon with cups of tea going cold between us. She said, "Raymond got the worst of your father, and he doesn't even know it." I asked what she meant. She said, "Your father at least knew, somewhere deep down, that he was taking up too much room. Raymond doesn't even know there are other people in the room." She was not a woman who said harsh things lightly, and that sentence has stayed with me for more than a decade. I am not telling you this to make Raymond the villain of the story. He is not. He is a man who was handed a pattern by the person he most wanted to resemble, and he wore it for so long it stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like skin. That does not excuse it, but it explains it, and explanation matters to me because I have spent a long time being angry at the wrong level of the problem. The $400 a month had started 9 years ago, the spring Raymond lost his job at the print shop where he had worked for 6 years. He called me on a Sunday evening, which was notable because Raymond typically called only when he needed something, and said he was in a hard spot. Could I help him out for a couple of months while he sorted things? I said yes. He was my brother. Our parents were both gone by then, our father in 2009, and our mother 3 years after, and there was no one else. The amount was manageable if I was careful with the rest of my budget. And I was 52 years old and still held, in whatever corner of myself still held such things, the belief that showing up for family was simply what you did. A couple of months became a year. A year became 3. 3 became 9. He never formally asked me to extend it. I never formally asked him to stop accepting it. We arrived, month after month at the first of the month, and the money moved from my account to his without ceremony or acknowledgement, the way utilities get paid and insurance premiums get processed, automatically, invisibly, just part of the infrastructure of a life. My colleague and closest friend Claudette, who had been teaching across the hall from me at Riverside for 14 years, had said to me at the 3-year mark, "Viv, this stopped being temporary a long time ago." I had said I knew. I had smiled in a way that indicated I was not ready to do anything about it. She had not pushed. She had simply filed it away in the part of her that was paying attention, because Claudette has always been better at paying attention than almost anyone I know. There were 4 thank yous in 9 years and 3 months. I know because I wrote them in the ledger margin in small numerals each time one happened, the way you mark something rare that you want a record of. The first was in the second month. The second was in the first year, after I helped him with a car repair on top of the regular transfer. The third was at Christmas 2 years in, when he had a couple of glasses of wine and became briefly sentimental. The fourth was 5 years ago, and I cannot remember what prompted it. 4. In 9 years and 3 months and 11 days. I am not telling you the number to make you angry. I am telling you the number because I need you to understand that I had been keeping track. That some part of me had always been keeping track. That the ledger in the kitchen drawer was not just a financial record. It was evidence I was collecting against myself, proof that I knew, had always known, and had chosen to keep going anyway. The birthday dinner was organized by my cousin Loretta, who is the family's designated occasion maker, the person who calls 6 months in advance, who researches the restaurants, who coordinates the guest list and confirms dietary restrictions and sends reminder texts 3 days before. She had been planning this one since January, calling me every few weeks to discuss details. 11 people came. My cousin Loretta and her husband Jerome. My Aunt Sylvia, who is 81 years old and has the particular clarity of a woman who has survived long enough to stop pretending about anything. Raymond, who arrived with his girlfriend Denise and was already talking at full volume while still in the entryway. My colleague Joyce, who had asked 3 separate times what I was doing for my birthday and whom I had finally told. 3 other cousins with their partners. Claudette was coming too. She had said she would be there, partly because she wanted to celebrate me properly and partly, she told me on the phone the week before, because she wanted to be there when it happened. "You sure you're ready?" she said. "I've been ready for a while," I said. I just didn't know it yet. I arrived in the burgundy sweater I had bought myself 2 weeks earlier as a pre-birthday treat, the one with the small pearl buttons down the left cuff. I had the pearl earrings in, the small ones my mother had left me, simple and old, the ones I saved for occasions that deserved them. I had spent the drive overthinking about the 6 days that had just passed since I had been to the bank, and the 11 days since the Thursday evening that had made the bank visit necessary. I want to tell you about that Thursday evening. It was 11 days before my birthday. I came home from school at 5:30, fed Walter, and sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and the annual budget spreadsheet I do every November. The spreadsheet was thorough. It had columns for income, fixed expenses, variable spending, and a column I had labeled transfers the first year and never renamed. I put $400 in that column every month. That Thursday, for the first time in 9 years, I added it up. All the way back. Every month, every transfer from March 14 years ago to the present. I did it slowly, cell by cell, the way you do arithmetic when you're not sure you want to arrive at the answer. The total was $44,400. I sat with that number for a very long time. The kitchen was quiet. Walter was asleep on the footstool by the radiator. The maple in the backyard was bare against the November dark. My tea had gone cold in the mug with the small chip on the handle that I keep meaning to replace, and never do. I sat with the number, and I did not cry, and I did not feel sorry for myself. I felt something that was not quite any of those things, a kind of still, cold clarity that comes when a fact that has been abstract finally becomes concrete. $44,400 was not an abstract number. It was 3 years of my car payments and insurance combined. It was a significant portion of my retirement contributions. It was the 2-week summer art residency in Santa Fe I had looked at for 3 consecutive summers, the one with the printmaking workshop, the communal press room, the high desert light I had seen in photographs and felt something in my chest about, and the application deadline I had missed twice because the money was never quite right, and the timing was never quite right, and there was always something else pressing against the edges of my budget. I opened a second tab on my laptop. I went to my bank's website. I sat in that kitchen for 6 more minutes, reading the confirmation screens. Then I closed the account the transfers had been coming from and canceled the standing order. The process took 11 minutes. The confirmation page gave me a reference number, C7741-9928. I printed it and put it in the cedar box on my bedroom shelf, beside my mother's letters and my teaching certificate and the other documents that matter. Then I went back to the kitchen and poured the cold tea down the sink and made a fresh cup and sat with Walter until well past 9 o'clock. I called Claudette the next morning before school, standing at the kitchen counter in my coat with my bag over my shoulder, and 5 minutes before I needed to leave. I closed the account, I said. When? Last night. She was quiet for a moment. How do you feel? Like I can see the room again, I said. Like someone opened a window. She said she would be at the birthday dinner. I said she didn't have to come on my account. She said she was not coming on my account, she was coming on her own account, and to stop being ridiculous. I said fine, and we hung up and I drove to school and taught 4 periods and ate my lunch in the faculty lounge with Joyce, who was telling me about her daughter's new apartment in Chicago, and I listened and asked questions and felt, underneath the ordinary texture of the day, the solid and specific knowledge of the thing I had done the night before. The walk from where I parked to Carlucci's was 3 blocks. Milwaukee in late November has a particular cold that is less about temperature than about intention. The air arrives with the specific purpose of reminding you that winter means business here, that the mild months were a courtesy and not a guarantee. I walked those 3 blocks, deliberately. I thought about the spreadsheet. I thought about $44,400. I thought about the Santa Fe residency and the communal press room and the high desert light. I thought about the 4 thank yous in 9 years. I thought about my mother saying Raymond doesn't even know there are other people in the room. I thought about the confirmation sheet in the cedar box. I walked through the door of Carlucci's feeling exactly the way I had felt at my kitchen table 11 days earlier. Not angry. Not bitter. Clear. Claudette was at the booth nearest the door, unwinding her scarf, and she stood up when she saw me and hugged me the way she hugs when something real is happening. Both arms, properly, nothing perfunctory about it. You look good, she said. I feel good, I said. She looked at me for a moment, reading my face the way she has always been able to read my face after 14 years of adjacent classrooms and shared lunches and too many difficult staff meetings to count. She nodded. She understood. We went to the private room. The family was assembling in the way families assemble, coats being shed, chairs being claimed, my Aunt Sylvia already seated and already evaluating the bread basket. Loretta had done the room beautifully. Small arrangement of flowers at the center of the table. Candle votives. A handwritten place card at each setting in her careful cursive. I found mine and sat down and looked at the table and thought, she worked hard on this. I am going to enjoy this dinner. Raymond and Denise arrived 8 minutes after me, Raymond's voice filling the hallway before the rest of him appeared. He was in a good mood, expansive, loud, the particular energy of a man who has decided the evening is going to be his kind of evening. He found me and gave me the sideways half-hug he has been giving me my entire adult life, the one that communicates affection without requiring the full physical commitment of a real embrace. Happy birthday, kid, he said, same as always, same as when I turned 40 and 45 and 50, as though the word kid were still applicable to a woman in her 50s, as though the fact that I am 6 years older than him had never quite registered as information. Denise hugged me properly and said I looked beautiful and brought me a small wrapped gift. A bottle of a wine she said she remembered I had mentioned liking once. I thanked her and meant it. Denise has always been kind to me. I found myself hoping, as I had found myself hoping before, that she was watching carefully, not for my sake but for the sake of what she would eventually need to know about the man she had chosen. The dinner was good. The food at Carlucci's has always been good. The pasta is the kind of pasta that requires no modifications or apologies, and the bread is exactly what bread should be. Conversation moved around the table in the reliable, layered way of family dinners. Old stories circled, new information shared. My Aunt Sylvia's opinions delivered with the authority of someone who has outlived most of the people who might have disagreed with them. Claudette and Joyce talked across me for a while about something to do with the school board, which I did not fully track, but found comforting in its ordinariness. Raymond held court at his end of the table, and I ate my pasta and watched the room and felt, underneath everything, the steady, quiet knowledge of the thing in the cedar box. The cake came at 8:47. Loretta had remembered Italian cream, which is my favorite and which I had mentioned once, 3 years ago, in a conversation I had not thought she was registering. The candles were lit. Everyone sang. 52 felt, in that moment, like a number I had earned. Not in the grim sense, but in the sense of having traveled a considerable distance and arrived somewhere with your luggage mostly intact. I blew out the candles. I made a wish that was not quite a wish, more like a quiet, internal acknowledgement. I am done. Not dramatically. Not with fanfare. Just done. That was when Raymond stood up. He had a glass of Chianti. He tapped it twice with his dessert spoon. The same gesture our father used, I noticed, with the same pause before speaking, the same settling into the moment that signaled an incoming performance. The table quieted. Raymond cleared his throat and looked around at all of us with the expression of a man who has been preparing his material. I want to say something, he said, because it's a birthday and birthdays are for taking stock. And when I take stock of this family, he paused, just as our father used to pause, the beat calculated for maximum reception. I see what we've built. I see the work I've put in to keep this family connected, to keep people showing up for each other, to hold things together. The way I've been there. The way I've carried things. He looked around the table with something close to satisfaction. Then he lifted his glass higher. So, I want to raise a toast. To me, the one who actually made something of himself. He drank. The room did various things at once. One of my cousins made an uncertain laugh, the laugh that happens when you're not sure if something is meant to be funny. Loretta's face arranged itself into careful neutrality. My Aunt Sylvia went very still in the particular way she goes still when she is composing something she will say in her own time. Claudette, beside me, did not move at all. Joyce was looking at her dessert fork. Denise was looking at Raymond with an expression I could not entirely read, something between embarrassment and a question she hadn't finished forming. I sat with it. I sat with $44,400. I sat with 9 years and 3 months and 11 days. I sat with the 4 thank yous written in the ledger margin in small numerals. I sat with the Santa Fe residency and the communal press room and the high desert light I had been deferring. I sat with the cedar box and the confirmation sheet and the reference number C, 7741-9928. I sat with my mother's voice, saying Raymond doesn't even know there are other people in the room. I did not heat up. I did not feel the dramatic surge of something breaking open. I felt the same clear, still, cold thing I had felt on my kitchen table 11 days ago, the same thing I had felt on the 3-block walk from my car, the same thing I had felt every day since I made the decision. I set down my fork. I looked at Raymond across the table. Good luck with that, I said. I picked up my purse. I stood. I put on my charcoal wool coat, the long one with the wide collar, the good coat I had bought myself 4 years ago when I decided I was allowed to have a good coat without apologizing for the expense. I pushed my chair in. I walked past the waiter who was clearing the far end of the table, past my Aunt Sylvia who said nothing but caught my eye for 1 second, past Loretta who looked stricken and then, I thought, relieved, and through the door of the private room. I walked through the main dining room of Carlucci's, past the other tables and their ordinary Friday evenings, through the front door, and out into the Milwaukee cold. I did not look back. 3 blocks to my Buick. I walked them the same way I had walked toward the restaurant, deliberately, with the cold doing its clarifying work on my face. I got in, started the engine, sat for 4 minutes with the heat running and the radio off, and the quiet of the car around me. Then I drove home. What Raymond did not know, and what no one at that table knew except Claudette, was that December 1st was 4 days away. December 1st was the date the transfer was scheduled to process. And when December 1st came, The transfer would attempt to draw from an account that no longer existed, and Raymond's bank would send him a notification, and he would understand, in the way you understand when a mechanism that has been working invisibly and reliably for 9 years suddenly stops, that something had changed permanently. I had not written him a letter. I had not prepared a speech. I had not scheduled a confrontation. I had simply closed the account and come to dinner, and the 5 words I said were not the consequence. They were just the goodbye. The consequence was already in motion. Claudette called me at 9:51 that night, 40 minutes after I got home. Walter had met me at the door and was already installed on my lap by the time the phone rang, which is his way of making clear that he noticed I was out later than usual and has opinions about it. "Your Aunt Sylvia," Claudette said, and I could hear she was trying not to laugh. "What did she say?" "After you left, there was about 30 seconds of silence. And then your Aunt Sylvia looked directly at Raymond and said, in that voice she has, you know the one, she said, 'Boy, what exactly have you built?' It was not a question. I knew Sylvia's voice. It was never a question. I laughed for the first time since before the dinner. A real laugh, the full kind. What did he do? He didn't have much to say, which is rare. Denise said happy birthday to the table in general, which was a nice save, and then the two of them left about 25 minutes after you." She paused. Loretta cried a little. Happy crying, I think. She kept saying she was sorry she didn't know, and I kept telling her there was nothing for her to be sorry about. I thanked her. She said she would call me tomorrow, and we said goodnight, and I sat with Walter in the quiet kitchen for a long time, looking at the cedar box through the open bedroom door, thinking about nothing in particular and everything at once. Raymond called at 8:16 the next morning. I let it ring. He called again at 10:04 and again at 12:37. 3 calls. No voicemails. That was Raymond's approach to follow-up, the call itself as the message, the assumption that my obligation to respond was self-evident and required no explanation from him. I did not return any of them. December 1st came on a Tuesday. I was in the middle of third period advanced drawing, walking between the tables while my students worked on their prospective assignments, when my phone lit up on my desk. Raymond's name. I put it face down and kept moving between the tables, stopping to look at a student's vanishing point, asking another whether the shadow felt right. At lunch I had a text. The transfer didn't go through. Did you change something with your account? I read it in the faculty lounge. Put the phone in my bag. Ate my sandwich. Talked to Joyce about the new curriculum guidelines and whether the district was actually going to fund the new paper cutter we had been requesting for 3 years. That evening there was a longer message. Viv, I don't know what's going on, but I need that money. You know my situation. Can you just call me and tell me what's happening? And the next morning a voicemail. 4 minutes and 22 seconds. I listened to it once, sitting in my car in the school parking lot at 7:40 in the morning with the engine running, and the December cold pressing against the glass. He said he didn't understand why I would do this without warning. He said he had been counting on that money for years, and I knew that. He said family helped family, and he thought I understood what that meant. He said he was hurt and confused. He said, at one point, that he had always been there for me. He did not mention the birthday dinner. He did not say the number $44,400. He did not say thank you for the 9 years he had apparently forgotten the length of. I sat for 3 minutes after the voicemail ended. The parking lot was nearly full by then, teachers arriving for first period, the school's entrance lights coming on against the gray December morning. I thought about the cedar box. I thought about the Santa Fe application deadline, which I had looked up the previous Sunday, February 15th. I thought about the printmaking workshop and the communal press room and the high desert light. I thought about what it would feel like to wake up in a place I had chosen entirely for myself, to spend 8 weeks making work without anyone else's emergency pressing at the edges of my budget and my attention. I got out of the car. I went in and taught 4 good classes. I called Raymond back 10 days after the dinner, on a Thursday evening. I sat at my kitchen table, the same chair, the same mug, Walter in his customary position on the footstool, and I called him and told him the truth in the plainest words I had. I told him I had been sending him $400 every month for 9 years and 3 months, that the total was $44,400, That I had made that decision because I loved him and because I believed in showing up for family, and that I was no longer going to do it, not because of the birthday dinner, though the birthday dinner had clarified something I already knew, but because the arrangement had become invisible in a way that arrangements should never be allowed to become, and I needed it to stop. He was quiet for a while. Then he said he had not realized how long it had been. I said I believed him. I said that not realizing how long it had been was itself part of what I was talking about. He said he was sorry about the toast. He said he had been showing off and he knew it came out wrong. I said I understood that. I said, Raymond, I know where you learned it. I watched the same person you watched. I just learned different things from him. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, do you think we're still okay? I said, we're family. That doesn't go away. But what does go away, as of right now, is the transfer. He said okay. We stayed on the phone for another few minutes without saying much, which is sometimes the most honest part of a conversation. We said goodbye. My Aunt Sylvia called me that Sunday. She said she had been thinking about the birthday dinner since it happened, and she wanted to tell me something. She said she had always seen how much I did for this family, not just Raymond, but all of it, the appointments and the paperwork and the phone calls and the general invisible architecture of keeping people connected, and she was sorry she had never said so directly. She was 81 years old and had known me since before I could walk and had never once said anything she didn't mean, and I held what she said with both hands. Your mother worried about Raymond, she said. She used to tell me. She said the boy never learned to see past himself. I know, I said. She was proud of you, though. She said you were the one who knew how to carry things without losing yourself in the carrying. I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. I submitted my application to the Santa Fe residency on a Sunday morning in mid-December. I sat at my kitchen table with Walter on my lap and the Earl Grey steaming in the chipped mug and the winter light coming gray and clean through the kitchen window, and I wrote the statement of intent that the application required. I wrote about printmaking, about the satisfaction of the physical press, the resistance of the surface, the way an image builds itself through repetition and pressure and patience. I wrote about wanting to spend time making work that had no deadline except its own completion, no purpose except its own clarity. I sent it at 11:14 in the morning. Then I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet kitchen with my tea and my cat and the clean winter light, and I let myself want the thing I had been not quite allowing myself to want for 3 years. It felt like putting down something heavy, not with drama, just setting it on the floor, straightening up, and noticing that my hands were free. I have thought a lot in the months since about what that dinner was and what the years before it were and what I want the years that follow to be. Here is what I believe. There are people who take and people who give, and most of us are some proportion of both, but the ratio can drift so slowly and so steadily over so many years that one day you sit down with a spreadsheet and a cold cup of tea and discover that the drift has become a destination. $44,400 is a destination. 9 years of invisible transfers is a destination. A residency you have wanted for 3 years and deferred 3 times is a destination you have been prevented from reaching by a choice you kept making without examining it. I am not angry at Raymond. He learned what he learned. The pattern was handed to him before he was old enough to question whether he wanted it, by a man who had received the same pattern from somewhere before him, and the inheritance of invisibility runs in families the way other inheritances run, passed down without ceremony, without paperwork, often without anyone noticing until someone finally stops to look at the total. But I do not have to keep funding it. Some kindnesses become so habitual they stop feeling like choices. That is when they become the most dangerous, not to the person receiving them, but to the person giving them, who has forgotten she had a choice at all. Real family sees the work that happens in the ledger, not the work with an audience. Anyone can see that work. Real family sees the transfers and the drives and the signatures and the fourth Thursday clinic appointments and the Sunday calls and the quiet, patient, invisible architecture of keeping things held together. That work deserves to be seen. And when it is not seen after enough years, the person doing it is allowed to stop. Love that requires you to be invisible to sustain, it is not love. It is a cost you have been paying without being told the price. The cost of being the one who carries things quietly, who handles and covers and transfers and shows up and never asks for the room, is your whole life if you let it run that long. Not in a single dramatic moment. Just gradually, month by month, for $100 at a time, one missed deadline at a time, one deferred trip at a time, until the spreadsheet tells you the truth all at once. I let it run long enough. I am not running it anymore. I think about you if you have listened this far. I think about whether you have a ledger somewhere, not necessarily a real one, though maybe you do. A running tally of what you have given to someone who has never thought to add it up. The money and the time and the labor and the years. If you have been keeping that count in your head, quietly, for longer than you can comfortably say out loud, I want to ask you one thing. What would you do with what you have been giving if you gave it to yourself instead?